What a story! What a story, Brandon. Uh, and the it's a must listen for people in the Astral Codex 10 podcast to listen to this review. It's phenomenal. It's a 2.5 hour review, but the way you've done it is quite amazing. So one of the questions that puts me to ask you is, when you did this research and when you look at schools and when you say open schooling versus micro schooling versus the traditional public and private schools,
Mhm.
so where have schools really failed to deliver for for kids, and therefore the education is therefore broken? Why do you think that's the case today?
I think there's a long answer to that, and let me try to give the shortest one. Schools, both of the traditionalist and progressivist varieties, have failed to understand the very first thing about what learning is for human beings. That sounds big, but I think I can back that up. And that is that for a human being, and I think this is actually also true of everything going down to, at the very least, fish,
Mm.
and maybe down to bugs too. But for a human being, definitely the most important thing, if we want to help someone learn something, is that we have to make it matter.
Mm.
And that schools, and this is true of micro schools and homeschooling approaches and tutoring and so many things, frequently forget this or make this sort of a small thing, or don't think it's realistic to even try to do that at all.
Mhm.
When a human being, we can talk about how to do this, right?
Mm.
Egan's entire approach can be interpreted as a way of making anything matter to a
Mm.
student.
Yeah, we'll
Um,
discuss that. Correct.
but the payoff of all of this is that if you make something matter to a student or to yourself
Mm.
when you are trying to learn something, um, then you will bring your full thinking to it. Your attention will be geared in. Your all of your working memory will be opened up.
Mm.
Things will fall into your long-term memory more easily. When you are, waking up in the morning or when you're in the shower, you're going to be thinking about these things if they matter to you. That there is a royal road to learning, and it is to make something matter. I sometimes imagine that inside of everyone's brain we have a button that if you just push it, it makes it matter. We can talk about
Mm.
cognitively what is going on when something matters to people, or neurologically what is happening when something matters to people. But I imagine I imagine it like there's a button inside of there, and as long as we can hit that button and keep that button hit when we
Mm.
are teaching, when we ourselves are learning, then we are geniuses,
Mm.
or something that maybe is not as august as the word genius, but I think really the word genius does come into it, right? There's that fake quote by
Mm.
Einstein: everybody is a genius, but if you expect a fish to climb a tree, I'm going to get this quote wrong, but if you expect a fish to climb a tree, it will live its entire life thinking that it's an idiot. I'm really butchering that quote, but there really is something that can be called genius that is natural to the human condition.
Mm.
And of course there is, because it's the only thing that we have going for us. We don't have claws. We don't have thick hides. We don't have horns. We don't have plates on our back. I think I'm getting dinosaur-y here. The only thing that we have going for us is the 3 pounds of slimy slime that is the seed of reason inside of our heads.
Mm.
And so it makes sense that we should all be kind of genius.
Mm.
But we're only that when something matters to us. So I think that is the major mistake, the major missed opportunity of both traditionalist and progressivist approaches to school. If I okay, so can I? I'm actually curious about this because I'm never sure in conversations how much I should use those terms, or
Mm.
whether I should reword them, or whether I should do whatever. So I'm curious. when I say the educational traditionalists and the educational progressivists, what comes to your mind, if anything?
So the traditionalists are the people who probably have a certain framework, uh, which is standard templates, which is what I call as the a production mindset to education,
Sure.
right? Which is there are certain grades, there are certain subjects. You
Yes.
go through the process, you get your degree, you get your you make them job ready, if I were to call it. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
The progressivists, as you call it, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Progressivists, as you call it, are a little more saying, you don't need to do what the world does. Go through open schooling, go through a different form of education. It could be a discovery method,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
probably not many parents are ready to accept, because they're very worried that what will the kids do after having this education,
Hmm.
right? So
Yes.
therefore you are at the both ends of the spectrum, and traditionalists approach it from a job mindset. I think the progressivists approach it from, okay, learning is important, but there is a very, very small percentage who basically are very worried that, okay, if this kid does this, what's the future?
Yes. Yeah. So that's good. That aligns quite closely with the way that I break these words down. And I need to say that in some ways, these words, these categories lie to us, right? Like all categories are false. Some categories are useful, to quote an important statistician. Um, so this category has its problems. The way that I think about the traditionalists is that the traditionalists can be. It seems like you're emphasizing the job ready for this.
Mm.
I think that there are also traditionalists who don't care about jobs at all.
Mm.
who, and I think that the people that I studied under in college, right, like they didn't care what job I was going to get. They wanted me to learn and understand the most important things in the world, the most beautiful things in the world, the truest things in the world. It was all about ideas, 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 and that was very much a traditionalist sort of education.
Mm.
But you can also have very jobs,
Mm.
big people in the traditionalist camp also. In the progressivist camp, uh, that includes people. I used to work at what I refer to, and very lovingly, as a hippie school
Mm.
outside of Seattle, and it truly is a very good school. They have wonderful people who are working in it. They get wonderful families. It is. I would happily send my kids to the school. Um, uh, but they did not particularly care about what jobs, preparing kids for jobs
Yeah.
there. What I would say, the way that these schemata work inside of my head, what I would say is the difference between traditionalists and progressivists is that for a traditionalist, an ideal teacher is a presenter of information.
Mm.
Whereas for a progressivist, the ideal teacher is a really good coach who can
Mm.
help you kind of learn for yourself.
Mm.
A student for a traditionalist is kind of a bucket
Mm.
for information to be put in, and a student for a progressivist is something like, oh, like I want. This sounds like a mean way of saying this, like a calculator, like
Yeah.
somebody who can do anything
Mm.
on their own, and they don't need information to be put inside of their heads.
Yeah.
They need to be taught how to think. They don't need to be taught information.
Mm.
Um, uh, the basic goal of a traditionalist is to push the kids,
Mm.
get them to focus, give them a rigorous curriculum that is really hard, and then like just push them as hard as you can, and maybe help them push themselves as hard as they can to learn this stuff.
Mm.
Whereas for a progressivist, it's about setting kids free to do what comes more naturally to
Mm.
them.
Mm.
This Traditionalists will see education as a very artificial thing.
Mm.
Progressivists will see it as natural, um, and um, and then very much in line with what you said, a traditionalist will say, okay, we should take this curriculum, and insofar as we're able to, we should standardize it so
Correct.
we can measure it, so we can help people across, our country do it exactly the same one best way. um, Whereas a progressivist will say, well, do we really need a curriculum at all? or
Yeah.
they the word curriculum was sort of reinterpreted to mean like, well, like a series of kind of loosely done activities. We should customize,
Correct.
the curriculum as much as possible
Mm,
for people. So that's what I mean by both of those. And I have been an arch traditionalist before, and I've been an arch progressivist before.
mm,
And I think in some ways, like these are poles of the human personality, and
yeah.
I think that we never really get totally beyond these things. I think in some ways, even that if one follows Kieran Egan's paradigm, one can still sort of be a traditionalist or sort of be a progressivist. But I do think that Egan points out that both of these are built on very stupid foundations, foundations that maybe made sense 100 years ago when like the big fight between traditionalism and progressivism was happening in America and in Europe. And now we look at this through cognitive science, we look at this through anthropology, we look at this through sociology and sociobiology and even biology sometimes. And we say, oh my gosh, both of these camps are stupid.
Yeah.
Nobody would ever invent an educational philosophy like these based on what we know now.